Started video. So this presentation is about the Carying Place, which is a nonprofit, and I'll set the stage and talk a little bit about what that is and what we do, and then what type of reporting that they do, and then kind of a bunch of other things. So here we go. So I did this a couple weeks ago, so if I don't look like I remember what my presentation is, it's because a few other things have happened in the meantime. But, so the goals I want for this session is for it to be interactive. Let's learn from each other. So interrupt me at any time if you got something you want to ask questions about, or some anecdote of your own that you want to share. That's perfectly all right. I want to share the story of the Carying Place and how we're going through this journey with them. I want to discuss how to introduce analytics to non-data and non-tech people. I kind of alluded to that in my pitch. You get interesting questions, and just people just don't have any idea. They think it takes so much work, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I want to discuss a little bit about data preparation, discuss some tools to use, and I know you guys probably use a lot better stuff than I use on a daily basis. I use as basic as I can to get the information I need, because I'm not I'm focused on individual problems, and I have some little tool set that I use, and if I need something really fancy, I find one of you guys to help out with that. Discuss chart presentation, about ways to start presenting some data, and then some ideas on how to ensure longevity of performance tracking within an organization. So hence why I'm on this journey. We were on a path, again, when I was on the board before. I left in 2011, and then found a kind of a different story when I came back. I've tried to make this presentation as anonymous as possible, so everybody's aware of HIPAA and FERPA and all that stuff. So there is a lot of information in here about the families we serve, but I've de-anonymized it all. You'll see I've blacked out a bunch of parts of or whited out, parts of the data that would show people's names and stuff like that. And I'll try not to share anybody's name as I do, and if I do, you can throw something at me, and I'll remind myself not to do that. Other discussion topics, this is not exhaustive, and I may repeat a few things, and I apologize for that. Some resistance to change in an organization. They were doing something, and we want them to do something else. Again, educating non-data and non-tech people to how to look at data and try to get some information out of it. Value of charting and historical performance, which probably to all you is immediately obvious. Some of the software choices you have in doing that, and again, I'm going to be on the basic side, but anybody's got ideas about what you see I'm doing with this, and you got some ideas about what we can do differently, which might be helpful. I'd really like to hear all that feedback. So benefits and trade-offs, and if you have experience with other nonprofits, and maybe get some inspiration about how you can take your skills that you have and help these other organizations that are really doing some good things in the community, but they need some help. So is that clear, kind of what I want to do with the presentation? Questions? Okay, I just want to go into a little introduction to the Carying Place. Again, I'm setting the stage for what this organization is. And disclosure here, I do serve as the vice president of the board, and so I'm involved in board development, and I've also brought this analytics view back to the board. So the Carying Place, that's our blurb of what we are and what we do. We teach homeless working families with children life skills for attaining independent living while providing short-term housing and support services that address their individual needs. So we're a transitional housing program in Wake County. Although we also serve people outside Wake County, and I'll show you that. Our clients are homeless working families with children, so to enter the program you have to be homeless. You can't be pre-homeless, you have to be homeless. You have to be a family, so you have to have children. You can be a single parent, dual parent. And you have to be working, because the program actually talks about budgeting and what to do with that. This is a program that teaches people how to fish, not how to feed them. And so there's many other programs that are suited for long-term homeless issues that we can't solve. We're again, you can see we're kind of limited by the portion of the homeless community that we serve. Our goal is to get them out of this homeless cycle. So we've been in existence for 26 years, and we've served 428 families. We have a 16-week program that they come to, so it's pretty fast. They go through, they're in a whirlwind to start with, they're homeless. They got a bunch of issues that they're dealing with. Their kids go to school, and how to put food on the table, and just everything you can imagine. And through 16 weeks, we show them a new way of doing things, how to get rid of old bad habits and get new good habits. We have 9 transitional housing units, so we can serve 9 families at a time. We have 4+ full-time employees, full-time equivalent employees. And then we have hundreds of volunteers. So on average, we probably have 300 volunteers working with the organization at any one time. The program, the meat of the program is a Thursday night. There's food provided, so the families can just show up. After the food, there's parents go to a program that they're budgeting and all kinds of stuff. It's very detailed. The children go off to a children's program, so that you don't have to worry about that distraction when the parents are, head down trying to figure out this stuff. And then they start budgeting. They don't actually have to pay for housing. We provide the housing for free for them. And so the goal is that they start building an escrow account so that when they leave the program, they have a bank account. They have enough money for first and last month rent and some other things, so they get started. And the result here is 90% of the families that go through the program 1 year out are still in stable living conditions, either renting or owning homes. So it's a very effective program, but there's a lot of work to have. So you can see these are a couple graphs that I made. So I don't know, the name Tufte was thrown out. If anybody knows Edward Tufte's work, it's all about high density charts and graphs and pictures that show a lot of information at the same time. So without a lot of words about our service area, you can pretty much figure out what our service area is here, right? And we've shown where the last place somebody had a stable residence, and then after the program where they're relocated to. So you can see we serve Wake County up into Durham County. And then these are our units. So we're in a suburban environment, so you get an idea where the families are housed. They're not in some run-down motel or something like that. They're actually in a very nice area. We take a lot of care so that we don't stand out in the neighborhoods. The families do move in, move out, but they're in this nice quiet setting. It's like a little oasis that they're able to come into, that they're able to work on programs. So, and you can see our assets, basically our housing assets, are in Cary, and we're basically in the downtown part of Cary, which is close to transit routes and grocery stores and the things that people need. If they can't drive, they have to be able to get somewhere. So we try to keep it as compact as possible, which is an issue for families when they come from this wider range. Kids have to change schools and different things, but only for 16 weeks. So that gives some interesting issues. So I'm on the board, and I want to talk about our fiduciary responsibility. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that term, but so in North Carolina, nonprofits are special organizations. The government gives you permission to operate without taxes. You can get money tax-free that people donate. But because of that, the corporation really is a public corporation. It means that we all own it. The board doesn't own it. The staff doesn't own it. There's no shareholders. So basically now the board has a responsibility to the state, really, and to us to manage the assets of this properly to do the mission of it. So there's a lot of interesting, if you've ever served on nonprofits, we are really the stewards of this organization now for the people in the area. So fiduciary responsibility, so we have to look at funding. We have to make sure that there's enough funding to be able to run the operation. And as you see these, just immediately you start thinking about key performance indicators. Okay, I've got numbers, I've got budgets and stuff, funding, fundraisers. The utilization of resources, so we have 9 units that we use for housing. How efficiently are we using those? But in specifically budget performance, how well are we meeting our budget, our housing utilization, volunteer activities. So we have these 300 people that we need to have some idea of what's going on. They're at the right place at the right time and have the right skills. We also need to look at the effectiveness of the program. And with that, we need to look at, are people in the program successfully completing the program, and the long-term success of the families. So you can start seeing all these would be key performance indicators that we have to develop some sort of number for, which we can chart over time, just from a data, analytics standpoint. We can start doing some data-driven decision-making too, because once we have some sort of historical performance, we know when we make a decision to change something or to try to improve something, does it have an effect or not? And without that, well, this is again the story. This is my vision of where we need to go, and I think a lot of people in this conference, data analysts, this is what you do on a daily basis. But if I want to show you what happens when you come across people that have no idea what we do. So the first attempt at charting. So at the time I was the treasurer of this organization, and we tried to figure out a key performance indicator with the easiest way, the most powerful way to show the health of the organization. And so I came up with the cash position of the organization. Turned out to be the best. And the easiest way is reported by the treasurer. And you can see here we have, based on our budget, we have a predicted end balance or cash balance. We have our actuals, so how are we doing against what we had budgeted for. And then here we're also tracking some sort of fixed assets, so money market reserve. It's not. So again, we start having some historical performance. You can start seeing, are we doing well or not, instead of just looking at a spreadsheet every time you come to a meeting saying, how are we doing against these goals? And you see the next year, part of this, you see that we're starting here with a cash balance of $40,000, and it's raised up now to $100,000 as the organization's grown. It's continued to grow. But you can see, even in our budget here, we drop below our required reserves. So we decided as a board that we needed to have 6 months of cash. And if we didn't have that, we would have a problem. So you can see that even our budget, we had said that what we know at the time we were budgeting, we were going to reach that goal that we had. But then in performance, you can see we're actually meeting that. So it gives you a way to look at those numbers, right? So this is back in, you can see 2006, 2007. And I'll give you a view of the staff reports, and I think these staff reports have been the same. They're 5 or 6 pages long. They give all kinds of detail, all the transactional stuff that's happened over the time, and you'll see things like this. So we have, this is part, we've got some referrals, so I started looking at numbers. I said, oh, these are interesting. Looking at it on a month basis, is it really helpful? I don't know. But it's important to report. The question is, what do you do with the numbers? But these reports, again, they've been generated for 26 years now. And the question is, are they being effective for the organization? But I start seeing, so we have some useful things here about volunteers. We see number of people, number of hours on a monthly basis. I have issues with this. We're looking at a year-to-date number against yearly totals. So we're looking at apples and oranges, and I don't know how effective, and I don't know, what you see in what you deal with. But, staff has decided that this is a way to present the data. But I look at it and say, well, that doesn't mean anything to me, because I can't judge this number against these. It doesn't make any sense, right? And talking to the people there, I said, well, it gives me an idea where we're at. Well, okay, but how do you bring that to other people? It's like you're down in the weeds, you're doing this every day, you've got an idea what those numbers mean, but how do you now go to this board or even outside people and say, we're doing a good job because I know what's going on? Well, it's really hard, unless those people trust you, it's really hard to take that on face value and say, yeah, you are. I don't really know. You're asking me for money. How are you using the money? So this is one. We'll get right back to this. So I extracted a few things out that I started using on this next journey. Here's another one. So this is a table that's provided every month, and it talks about families. So we've got a family number, we've got a property, we've got some move-in and move-out dates. But again, every month this chart or this table changes. There's some data that may be updated, that may not be updated. Some interesting things on here, like this is in September. We've got somebody that quit the program, but it's saying their projected end date is in October. So that's obviously not updated. It's not valid data anymore. And then, so again, so this is presented. So I sat with staff and I said, you know, how do we get beyond this? We started this charting, and I came back on the board and, oh, that chart I had of the financial graph, that's no longer done. The treasurer at the time said, gosh, it's a lot of work to make this chart. And only one person on the board is asking for it, so I decided we wouldn't do it anymore. Okay. So again, talking about, so with the staff, I said, how do we start this? How do we get some numbers? We have this responsibility. There's this whole thing, and the pushback was, you know, why do we need a chart? And can you just boil this down to one number that will tell us if we're doing good or not?
Oh, I never heard that before.
Never heard that, right? I was like, well, that's kind of the other direction. It's like, well, why do we need a chart? And then it's hard. It's like, well, there's this thing called data science, and it tells you, you know, that even people know a picture's worth 1,000 words, you know? Anyway, so we started looking at housing utilization. I said, okay, how do we know how well we're using the apartments? We got 9. What percentage of the time are they full? If we don't have some numbers, we looked at this. So how do we get an indicator of this housing utilization? And so we came to this thing that every week on one day, we'll pick a day, Wednesday or Friday or something like that, and we'll just start writing the number. 6 of the apartments are full, and we'll start building this, right? Okay, well that's a way to start. And I said, well, over time we can start building a graph, and then we can start seeing something happen. And then volunteer activities. So you saw the table, and I said, oh, well, our staff reports include monthly figures of volunteers and total hours. I can do something with that. If I get the last 12 reports, I can actually put that on a graph and show you something that's going on. They said, gosh, that's a lot of work. I said, well, it's only 12 reports, right? I mean, I don't know what projects you did, but, you know, if you've got 1,000 or 10,000 things you've got to bring in, that's work, right? But 12? And those tables, they're in Word. So I can just cut and paste them into a spreadsheet, right? And start getting it. So said, well, so we started out, said, we'll do these 2 things, right? We'll start with some volunteer activity. We've got some numbers we can use. And then housing utilization, okay, we'll start collecting this, and over time we'll start generating growth. So easy wins. We go, take the data, now we have some sort of chart. So I just looked here, we have 3 different types of volunteers that we look at, the total number of hours that are being used, and then I have number of people and number of hours, so I can figure an average, and again, I don't know if this is valid or not, but just something that I can chart, an average number of hours per volunteer per month. Seems like it might be interesting. And again, it's thrown up there, and does it mean anything? I don't know. And what I've told all the people in this organization is this isn't going to give you any answers, right? It's going to give you a lot of questions. And over time, you see something, you say, what does this mean? And, you know, we have to do a lot more work to figure out what that actually means. And then, because I'm really impatient, I'm like, I really like this graph because I made it, I think. The cash back, right? I said, well, I'll just get 12 of the treasurer's reports, and I can get these numbers, and I can make this graph. It doesn't take up time, right? So you can see again, so we've gone now, so you see this budget is now in the, you know, 350,000. So this organization has grown over time. This is an excellent view. And then we have, we now have 9 and 12 month reserves. So again, the organization's become in better financial condition, which are great to see. But again, it's hard to tell people where you were and where you are now. But you can see we track pretty well on the actual versus our budget. But then I said, well, you know, we've got this other table, and it's got a lot of stuff in here. And how can I make this, because I'm really impatient. I don't want to wait, you know, 2 months, 3 months for this other utilization of properties, right? Well, it's like watching grass grow, right? Or paint dry. It's like, no, that's really painful. I don't want to do this. I want to get in and start showing you what this is so that we can maybe develop something else in some other areas. So I started looking at this. I've got move-in dates. I've got projected graduation dates. I've got some other information starting to put in here, which is maybe when they left the program. And so I already have the staff reports. I can take this and I can start taking that information. And I was thinking a move-in date, I can do a calculation. I know what week of the year that is. I know what day of the week that is. So I can start developing some stuff. I've got the housing units that it's in. I've got family numbers. So I've got a bunch of things I can use here. So I took these 12 tables and I created a master table, right? So now boiling down all that information that changes. So this is kind of data preparation stuff. I've got to go from that raw data they're collecting, which is changing every month, and build it into some sort of table where I now have families and apartments, and you can see here these boxes. So this is, for me, this is the report that was actually reported on. But I've also got effective graduation dates now as well, so I can length time of the program. So I actually can get a lot more stuff out of this than I ever thought of initially. So I've tried to solve the first problem, which is I'm really impatient. I want that number of utilization of properties. And then I boiled this into this table, which is I can look at it now by apartment. I know which family is in which apartment on what weeks. And so now if I look this way, I've got that. I know how many apartments are filled on what week. And then something I wouldn't have gotten the other way, I can look down this way and start looking at which apartments are being utilized over time. Is there a difference there? So our resulting charts. So this is the first one. And, you can look at that. I picked, so this is actually looking across that table, right? So this is utilization by week. So this is the number of units that are occupied on that week. And I think I picked the Wednesday to say if it's occupied on that Wednesday, it's occupied that week. But you can start seeing the blue here is the actual, and then I started saying the green is available. We had a fire in one unit. We had some others, so we have to look at how many are actually available to use. And then I said, well, I need some sort of way to, it's kind of, noisy data, so let's start looking at a trailing average here. And I just picked 5 and 15, and you may have a problem with that, I don't know, but I just needed a number and they seemed good. It's a 16-week program, so maybe I should pick 16. Anyway, so it starts to give me some idea of, and again, now questions start coming right forward. How effectively are we using these apartments? Well, on the face of it, I look at it and say, gosh, on average, at this point, we're only 2/3 of our units are being used. And if you look over time, it looks like only about 7 of them are being used. So, again, I don't know why, but now, when we look at this, instead of looking at that table, gosh, what does that mean? I can now look at this chart, and it's now trying to get people to look at this and say, what does that mean? And then, like here, suddenly we can go for a long time without them being full, and then like a week, we can fill them up. But then we kind of drop off again. So you can start saying, I can make a decision to fill these, but if the families aren't going to finish the program, then, I've got another issue. So this is looking at a table the other way. So I'm looking at the 9 units and why, or just like 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months of occupancy. You get some interesting things. And again, they're just questions. Like these two on the end, it's a duplex. These should be identical, but they have totally different occupancy, right? Maybe one's not good. I don't know, but the staff doesn't like it. I don't know. And we have some that are really good. This one here, it's been really good over time. Why is that one better than the others? Again, without actually doing, so if we had started with just tell me how many apartments are full every week, I wouldn't have been able to do this. We wouldn't be able to see some difference. Again, I don't know what that means. And that's kind of maybe, I don't know how you get across that, because if you're trying to give credibility, we need to do this thing. And they're like, well, it's going to tell us something, right? I said, yeah. Well, was it going to tell us what to do? I'm like, no, it won't tell you what to do, but at least it'll start showing you that something's going on and you might want to think about it. And if you do something different, like, great, we're going to spec the apartments for people. Well, if they're not effective for the program. So if we look at the next graph, so this is the other data I had, and this is an interesting indicator. So as families graduate or leave the program, this is kind of the trailing. So it's chronological in a way. So the last person to leave is here, and then everybody before that goes back this way. So you can see our target here is 16 weeks. Now we look at this. Well, actually, this is last winter. Remember, we had all that ice and snow, and we had a lot of nights that our program couldn't meet just because it wasn't safe for anybody to be out. So we actually modified the program and said, well, we can't force them to graduate in 16 weeks. So a lot of them went out to 20 weeks and longer. But that's understandable. But now, why is this? Why do we suddenly have a bunch of families that aren't even making a couple weeks in the program? So, now it's like, how do you take this and try to make sense of it? It starts giving you some idea of, what's happening with that. Now I can check, I can make a decision, but now I can make one indicator good, but another one is going to tell me, oh, you're doing the wrong thing, right? So that's how to look at this data. And I don't know, with the limited things I've given you and just thrown this at you, if you got any ideas of what we might look at, or more interested in knowing what that is. Some other charts here. So again, I've got a move in and move out day. I can look at the day of the week. I can calculate that really easily. I'm actually using Google Sheets for this. I can calculate the day of the week, right? Just the little formula tells you this date, what day of the week is it, and so now I can chart that. And I see, well, Monday is a really popular day to move in and move out. I don't know why. It may be that people that move in and move out on the weekend are all reported on a Monday. It doesn't, if we're a volunteer-driven organization, why do you put this on a work day instead of on the weekend? So again, it's just, there's a bunch of questions. There may be a reason why we're doing that, but we don't know why. So, and then here's another one. So they started reporting family size, and so again, I just look at the family size over time, because it seems like we're having an increase in the number of people. Well, that could dramatically change the program. The number of people that show up on a Thursday night that need to be fed and need to have programs. It's just we have the same number of families, but the number of people are going to change. So that's kind of an interesting thing. Again, it's just when you look at on a month-by-month basis, you may not know what's going on. And then I got to my anecdote. So it was actually the new president of the board. We were sitting talking about some of this, and he said, and he's been now on the board for 2 or 3 years, and it's a 26-year-old organization. And he says, there seems to be a lot of older children now in the program. When I've been going to program night, it seems like there's a lot of older children. Maybe we need to change our children's program to do that. So this is an anecdote. I've seen something. I haven't seen 26 years worth of stuff. Is this different than it has been? I don't know. It's not that isn't a valid thing. Maybe we should do a different program for older kids than younger kids, and different than what we're doing. But is there a need? Is something changed? Like you see that family graph with number of people, that's changing. We might want to make some difference there. So I said, well, actually, there was a group of people kind of in between when I was on the board before and now, and they have actually set the stage to do a lot of data analytics. They went back through these binders of the family, so we keep these binders with every week they're there and all the data on them, ages and the kids' information and just all kinds of stuff. And there was effort to put all that into a spreadsheet. So I said, you know what? I've got this data, which goes back now to family 1, which shows me how many people are in families. It shows me their ages. So I said, if I chart that, we maybe can tell if this anecdote is valid or not, right? So I just threw it on a scatter plot, and it looks ugly. I apologize for the color choice there. But immediately, I don't see, and maybe you see something else, but I don't see anything that would say that there's more older kids in the program. And this goes back to like family 300, so this goes back 4 or 5 years.
What's your axis?
So this is, age of the children, sorry. So this is age of the children, so 0 up through 25, and then this is the family number starting at 300 and then going up to the first family 428. So it's just looking at, for a family, I have so many kids in there, I know what their ages are, and I just do a scatter plot of that. So over time, this is, 5 or 6 years ago coming to today. Again, and I don't know, there may be enough data to do something statistically valid there, but on just first glance, there doesn't seem to be any trend whatsoever that would say that, we have an anecdote, I've seen something, I think we need to take action to, well, we have this data, is it really different? And not to say that what you're saying isn't valid, maybe we do need to do that, but let's make sure we're not taking action based on, we know this to be true, that things have changed in the program, so we need to do something. Instead of that, we can say, well, we think now that we're, developed enough that we can start differentiating some of the things we do in the children's programs to better serve older kids and younger kids. And then I also had the data, so I said, well, let me just do this because I have the data in the spreadsheet. Let me just look at the age of the parents and over time. So this again, this goes from, this is 0 and that's 60, but again, the same family number that's shown up there. And you can see these lines are really faint, but the blue is the mother's age. That seems just the trend line here, right? That seems to be fairly constant. The father's age seems to be trending up a little bit. I don't know what that means, whether it's even valid as statistically, but again, it's another way to take this data and start putting it on some sort of chart so you can start looking at it and say, looking at a table full of numbers doesn't tell you anything. Going down to one number definitely doesn't tell you anything, right? Yeah. So where are we? So I was just going to review our session goals. So my presentation is basically done. I want to throw it open to you all. I've kind of given a story where we're at. We want to go a lot deeper. We want to answer some of these questions, that we're getting now from looking at these charts. We're starting to get people on board to say that, maybe this is a valid thing. Even at board meetings, we have people, what do you want us to get out of looking at these tables? Yeah, Dave?
Yeah, I think it's very valid to start bringing out, even bringing out the data in a different format like you have done with charts rather than tables or just, yes, we have the data in binders, but now if we aggregate them so that they can see different things and then start asking different questions. We work with another group that's very similar to that, where they were getting referrals. At the beginning, they had shied away from marketing themselves in some way, that when they looked at the source of the referrals, they understood that it was the word ministry. When they moved to Durham, they didn't want to be called a ministry, so that they wouldn't be associated with a religious organization. But then they understood that the churches were giving them good referrals that were completing the program. So even though they were not going to change their name once again, they were going to tighten the source of the partnerships with the churches so that they would get people that would complete the program. And Melissa was there, Melissa, right? Yes, and helped us. She did a fantastic job just looking at all those referrals, thousands of them. But they didn't know until they scraped the data and looked at where people were coming from. And that is the value of presenting the data in different ways. And at the beginning, you don't know what you're going to find, but then they start asking different questions and figuring out, oh, this is why we're doing it this way, or why we should do it a different way moving forward. So this is very valuable that, to bring different ways of looking at the data and questions to ask.
Yeah.
You may already be doing this, but I know sometimes when I'll do a graph and I present it, I'll draw like a little text box just to like outline of, so like maybe something in a graph jumps out to you, but it might not to somebody else, so you can just draw like a little outline of where you see like a change or something, maybe a little text box, a little arrow, kind of bullet point it, so it's for people that aren't really visual, that way you kind of have both. It could
Great idea.
So you're in a leadership role in a nonprofit and work with a lot of people who may not be have a strong data background. How do you go from that we have data in a binder to we're now looking at graphs to now we're going to use this to make changes to the organization?
That's an excellent question. So it's not an easy road, right? Being an individual in an organization that wants to do this, and everybody else is saying, why do we spend this time? Again, it's the treasurer that said, it's a lot of work to make that graph. Really, it's you have a spreadsheet made, you throw 3 numbers in, the graph appears, How much work is that? But they saw it as work, and they didn't want to do it. And they're like, they asked, and only one person on the board at the time said, yeah, that's valuable, keep it in there. So they're like, well, only one person's asking for it. I get to decide because I'm the person generating it, so I'm not going to do it anymore. Part of it is you almost need a little core of people, 2 or 3 people to actually do the work. Like, I came up against that, it's like, gosh, 12 reports, that's so much work. And I said, so like I said, I do open data projects and stuff. We deal with data sets that are millions, and if you have to scrape that from websites, Rick's done this too, we do this at events, people set up all kinds of processes to harvest this data and start putting it in somewhere so you can actually look at it. 12 reports to me, gosh, if I had 100, well, maybe that would be 10 minutes and awesome. Maybe that would be an afternoon's work, right? Because I know what I'm doing. The people that are telling you that, they don't know what to do. They just look and go, gosh, I don't know how to make a spreadsheet. And I don't know what to do. I don't know how to make that. And that was part of the pushback. He said, I don't want you to make it. I just want you to give me the data. I'll make it for you because it's really easy for me to do. When those tables come out once a month now, it takes me like 30 minutes to generate 15 pages worth of charts now. I just add to my chart, and it just grows over time. Again, it's just presenting it, and people, they just look and say, I don't know what to do with this, and after a while, somebody say, oh, I see something. They think, oh, well, maybe this is worthwhile. Maybe I should look at it too. So it's almost thankless work. But we're there for reasons. I'm on this board. I'm a volunteer. I'm there for the benefit of the organization. Obviously, the organization is long-standing. I want to make it better. I want to make this a better place. I want to make the world a better place. So I'm going to put in the time to do this. I've got the skill set. I'm going to bring that. I have other responsibilities as well. But there's nobody else on the board that's willing to sit there and generate this. And we're not at the point of having staff do it. So that's one of the things that I want to discuss. Yes.
So just in my experience working with data from nonprofit organizations, sometimes, especially since it's very established organization, you got to ask, are the other people in leadership really looking to ask questions about the way that they're doing things? Because they've been doing it the way they've always been doing it, and it works. So it's like, are they really pushing to say, oh, how can we be using all these resources better? How can we rearrange our volunteers to be more efficient? So that takes some work sometimes.
Right.
Change takes work.
It does, yeah. You going there?
What sort of data do you collect on the success of the program with regards to, you said a year out, you know the family is in a stable relationship with housing.
Yeah. Good. Okay.
And so as a follow-up, if you collect data on that, are there things you can do to predict if it is successful or not? Like throwing out an idea like how much money they had in escrow when they left to attendance at these Thursday things. Do you do that, and do you have any ideas?
We want to do that. Okay, so once families graduate, they are in the lower end of the socioeconomic scale. They're basically renting apartments, and you know the deal when you're renting apartments. You come to your end of your lease, and your landlord wants to jack up your rent. So you say, well, I could live over here, right, and get cheaper rent. So they become very mobile. So keeping track of them is difficult over time. We do have what we call an aftercare program. So continuing along what they've learned over the 16 weeks, they can go back once a month. And we have other things that are interesting to them. And we try to reach out and contact them. So the best numbers we have are 90% or 85 to 90%. It depends on who it is. It's not hard and fast, but we want to go much further, exactly what you're saying. We have all this data now in these binders. We know how much escrow they have. We know what their income was. We know what type of job they have. We know the situation they're in. How do we take that now and put it somewhere and do some real data analysis to do that type of demographic or sociographic type stuff? We have a question here.
Did you say how the data is actually being generated? You said binders.
Yeah, so it's the program works. There's a binder that's made. It goes through all the 16 weeks. There's a certain program for each week. There's budgeting as part of this. There's a budget worksheet that has to be worked out. There's a bunch of other things that are done over time that are produced over the 16 weeks. There's application. There is, so there's all this information, and there's what I didn't say is there's 3 people that work with the families. So volunteers that work. They go every week for the 16 weeks. They work with the families, and that hard, ask the questions and make sure it's filled out properly, and it's really intensive. It's like, well, this is what you plan to do. Show us all your receipts. Show us all the cash that's in your pocket, and let's see how you did. It's neither good or bad, right? It's like, how well did you do? And then knowing that, how do you go the next week and do the next week budget? So it's really simplified. I'm not sure I could do that myself, but it's a discipline they need to get into.
So then, are you going through the binders and manually putting it all into Excel?
Yes. So it is not digitized yet. So that would be an effort. That again, the question then is, how do we get to tablets or something to keep all our information electronically? We will have a security issue. Obviously, we keep a lot of very sensitive information on families, education information, medical information, background information. Legal information, so it's all got to be compartmentalized. And if we have people work on it, we need proper, sign-offs and confidentiality agreements, and we need to store it properly and lock it away. So only on effort like this, when we decide we need to do something, then like this previous group, they had actually generated this new spreadsheet. Didn't have all the data, but had enough so I could go from that anecdote to some analysis, right? And that was great. We had the data, but there's so much other stuff in there. And so we currently have a group that's looking at that. What can we pull out of here? And maybe we don't go back to family 1, but we go back to 100 families or 50 families and start looking at that. And then can we predict that sort of stuff? Yeah.
Do you do any correlation of whatever your success factor is, graduating, for example, right? You've got a graph there of the graduating percentages, some drops, and obviously some that went a little bit longer, but that's okay. Correlate that to something, initial income level, whether they had the bank account number, the age of the parent, the age of the kids, the whatever, what house they're in, maybe that drives something.
Right. Yeah, so that's a great question, along the same lines. So no, we don't. So even that one graph I showed you with the completion of the program, that was really not tracked. But again, for our fiduciary responsibility, we need to do that. And then once we start doing that, then we start asking questions and start getting to exactly what you're talking about. What are those other things that would then predict? Because really the gatekeeper to our program, when I talked about, we can fill the units fast, but they may not stay, right? So the gatekeepers, there's a 1-hour interview. We have a whole application with background, with all this stuff. We do a credit report, we do a background check. we know the credit report's always gonna have something on it, right? And it doesn't matter, these people are homeless. We wanna know what it is that they need to deal with. It doesn't need to be a surprise halfway through the party. Oh, you have a judgment list. And we didn't take that into account in the budget, right? We wanna know that, so we have a lot of that data. It's just, how do you use it? I got lost in my answer, but hopefully I answered what it is. So, where were we? So, interactive, I think we're almost done. Interactive, learn from each other. Hopefully you have learned something from the discussion here. Share the story. I think I shared the story. We discussed a little bit about how to introduce analysts to non-data and non-tech people. Discussed a little bit about the data preparation I did. The tools, so basically you can see I'm just using Google Sheets. It's easy, and from the standpoint of anybody on the board, it's a $0 entry fee basically for anybody to participate. Chart presentation, how I was doing some of that. And then longevity performance tracking. This is where, if we can get this to a standpoint, the problems we've had in the past, we've had 2 groups now that have tried this. I was part of the first group, there was a second group that started, and all these efforts disappeared. And the group that was doing this left. You can only be in a board so long. How do we boil this down to a point where it's just automatic, it just happens as part of that staff report, and it's not seen as boardroom too? And I don't know if we got a few minutes, does anybody have any ideas about how to make it so that, these efforts, we can do a great effort to point in time, which is valuable, a snapshot of health or the organization or effectiveness. But how does this, 10 years from now, when I come back on the board, hopefully I don't have to, but, I've left and come back, how do I make sure that the progress we started has continued and I come to a better place? Yeah.
Well, one of the reasons that you wanted to track these things in the first place is so that you can give accurate information to your donors, I guess, about how you're using your funds. So if it's something that they start expecting, then that's a lot of pressure to keep doing it.
Good point.
Somewhat similar along that. So if you're having volunteers from the just initial data collection part of it to try to get them to buy in as far, then you could say, a lot of people are going to volunteer because they want to put it on the resume, right? So now you have some key, I can say, we helped do this, but having a metric they can actually use on the resume, which is valuable to them. So, maybe that's another way to get their buy-in.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, if you get an ROI, like was mentioned before, a lot of times it pays to actually hire a part-time or 1099 or somebody to actually do this, because then you get the continuity.
Right.
Because I too have been on boards, and you have strong data analytics, and that person rolls off the board, and it all the wheels fall apart, right?
Yeah. We had a question right
I
now.
was just saying that maybe you could build a simple web app using some sort of, e-tool that's, Oracle, Apex, or something similar to that that's easy, and then have the data make it easier for the people that are initially signing these people in to collect that information and have, instead of them putting it into a spreadsheet, have it just automatically happening behind the scenes, so that they're just, opening their app and typing their stuff in, and it just automatically gets pulled.
If you have insights on how to do that, I'd love to talk to you after. Because
I'm
proposing very simple tools, Google Sheets, and it's too complicated for them. But yeah.
Yes, my comment was related. Some sort of simple app, but that means focusing not so much on the data delivery starting, but on the data entry.
Yep.
And I've worked with clients that, they're only going to use Excel, and they want the secretary to be able to push a button to send the reports to who needs them, and we build it, and then it's all confidential data. So it's just an app where it says, put in your Excel spreadsheet, and then it says, do you want the Word report or the Excel report? And they push the button and we get it. And then, they haven't,
So
we had to come up with what simple graphics did they want, and we had to really focus on changing the way they put in.
So is that using some of the automation tools in Google? Or
yeah, just, it's a little shiny app that holds nothing. It's very tiny.
We got another hand.
Helps.
Anything else want to contribute? I think we're past our time. Maybe anybody knows. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for participating.
So the schedule should be outside, so you will see which other sections are coming up. And Rick, I think we're on next.
Is that on Twitter?